Hey everyone, it's Christine Gritman here with Social. I do this show every single week where I interview one of my smart friends about a different topic on social media. And March is live streaming month, so I had to have Stephanie Liu, who is a live streaming and communications expert, on the show. Hey Stephanie, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are
I'm
you?
good. I'm good. I'm so excited to have you back. You've been on the show before, and we actually had technical difficulties. So hopefully this time we're all set. But I wanted to just jump right in. One thing that's really cool about you and what you do, every marketer is in communications, right? You have taken it to another level. You have studied not only the art, but you've actually studied the science of communications. You are a neuro-linguistic programming NLP
Trainer. Yep.
yes, you're an NLP trainer. You are a certified hypnotist, which is mind-blowing. So I would love to find out just a little bit about that first. How did you decide to do all of that and how it impacts what you do?
So this is actually a really, really good story.
Ooh.
So for those of you that are entrepreneurs, you might be familiar with what's called masterminds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had a group of friends that lived in a house, and it was called the Epic Entrepreneur House. And they were all entrepreneurs, and they all had to make like a certain amount of money to be eligible to live in that house.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so we would always have masterminds in that house. And at one point, someone said, you know what, we should all learn NLP and we should all learn it together.
Ooh.
And so we realized, okay, cool. If we really want to up our communication game, if we want to be more persuasive, then yeah, let's all learn neurolinguistic programming. And so together, there was like 10 of us from San Diego that went to Vegas to do this 4-day training to learn NLP. And then that's when it all started. Because after we were done doing that, some of us got speaking engagements. Some of us started getting new clients, and things just got easier and easier for us. And that's when we realized, well, something has shifted in the way that we communicate.
There's some magic
and something
there.
I was like, and something has shifted in the way that I'm able to increase my impact and my influence, and as a result, my income. And so after that, I was like, okay, cool. So the first level is usually like practitioner. You want to take it to the next level, you go into master practitioner, right? You want to master your craft even more, then you become a trainer. And so this has really been like a 6-year journey for me. And it's been so much fun, so amazing. And coming from the agency world, when you talk to other people, you're like, wait a second, you're NLP certified too? Like even Chris Penn, like we were
Really?
geeking out over it. Yeah, we were
Oh,
geeking
that's
out over
awesome.
it. Yeah, so we were talking at Social Media Marketing World. And we were talking about stage presence and how we were going to use stage anchoring and nested loops. And I was like, wait a second. You sound like you know a little bit about NLP.
You're
And he's
like,
like,
those
I
are
do.
terms. That's lingo.
Yeah. And then that's when it was just like instant connection, because then we totally got each other at like a neurological level and we just started geeking out.
Oh, I love that. So let's back up and talk about what some of those things are. So you mentioned, well, actually, I want to go back to things that relate more to live streaming, but I'm sure they do. Stage anchoring you mentioned, and also loops. So let's talk about those and how people can make use of that.
Okay. So this is the fun part.
Yay!
So stage anchoring, that's how you work the stage, and that's how you're going to take someone through a story from beginning to end, right? And how you use the stage to create anchors so that when you're telling a story, anytime you hit that stage, they remember that story, right? How you actually apply that to video, especially even live streaming, is pretty simple. So like you and I, we're cropped, right? So we have like this amount of space to really use our hands. And you learn this, right, over at Social Media Marketing, that it's so important for you to use your hands as you communicate because it actually lightens your cognitive load. If you talk on camera without using your hands, it's actually a lot harder for people to understand.
Because you're like,
So they're like this, and they're like, what's going on? Like, why is she hiding her hands? So if you were to use your hands strategically, Christine, what can you do? So we talked about, like, if you want to talk about anything in the past, I'm always going to put it over here, right? So it's like, if you're struggling with X, Y, and Z, blah, 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 I'll always talk about it over here. But if you want to talk about opportunities, let's talk about it over here, right? Think of what it would be like if you were there at Social Media Marketing World and you got to experience what it was like to hang out with Christine, because Christine is awesome and amazing, right? So you anchor her over here. Anytime you're talking about like expert or authority, you want to place that on your chest, right? Because it's kind of unconscious. You're saying like, I had such a fantastic time. It was such a great event, right? And then it was funny because Christine, someone after the talk was like, you know what? I was wondering why I was so irritated when someone was telling me about their dinner, because they were talking about like how they didn't like it, but they kept putting it on their chest.
Yeah.
And it made me want to get away from that person. I was like, oh, isn't that interesting?
It's fascinating.
Right?
I loved how you pointed out that also when you talk about problems, like when you talk about issues, like for example, I might say something like, you have a huge, it's so hard to figure out, you don't know what to post, or, people aren't coming into your store or whatever. So you need to create content, put that, I'm going to help you create content. You're putting the good stuff on yourself and putting the bad stuff away. That's fascinating. And it's so basic, but it's something we don't think about.
Yeah. It's one of those things too, where you can watch TV anchors and you could see how they've mastered the art of nonverbal language. Mm-hmm. And when you start to put it together, you're like, oh, those are the clues, right? And even if you're watching like politicians, if they're trying to distract from a question, they might actually like physically push it away. Like, I'm not talking about it. I'm going to move over here. Mm-hmm. And you're like, wait, you just deflected the question that was pointed at you.
It's fascinating, and people do this subconsciously, but if you can learn how to use these tools on purpose, with purpose, right? Mm-hmm. And strategically, then it's going to be so much more advantageous to you, because it's going to level up your influence in the way that you communicate. And it's funny because, and I said this on stage, it's like I used to manage social media for an entire family of Italian restaurants. Mm-hmm. And girl, let me tell you, anytime that I was in that meeting and there was like 10 restaurant owners, I was like, oh my goodness, like who is making the point right now? Like who is the main person that I should be paying attention to? Because hands were flying. Yes.
And then like the matriarch started speaking and I was like, oh, that's the person I should be listening to.
That's who's holding the conch shell.
Yep. Get everyone in line.
I love that. And another thing that you said in your talk that I found really cool, and this, again, like so much of these things, is something that I just sort of did without thinking about why, which is you mentioned that you show your hands at the beginning of every broadcast that you do. You're like, hi! And it's, tell us a little bit about why you do that.
Yes. Okay. So back in the caveman days, whenever we were approached by a stranger, we always looked at their hands unconsciously because we wanted to know if they were a friend or if they were a foe, right? And so what happens is that when you're doing video and you don't show your hands at all, unconsciously what you're communicating to the other person is fear. Because now their brain is like, well, what is she holding? What is she doing? And when you don't show your hands, you're triggering that part of the brain that processes fear, and fear causes distrust in others. So it would make sense for you to disengage that fear just by waving hi. That's like the simplest thing that you can do. But most people, when they jump on camera, they don't know what to do with their hands. Mm-hmm. They feel awkward. They're like, maybe I should just put it underneath my desk. But then it feels weird.
Yeah.
Notice, like, whenever you're watching a live video, notice if someone isn't moving their hands throughout the whole entire video. How does that make you feel? And then the second that they do show it, do you notice a difference in how you're engaging or actually responding to that person? And then take note, because that's how you're making your audience feel. Does that make sense?
It really does. And it's interesting because I originally started moving my hands on video just to catch people's eyes in the scroll. Because there's this woman who I'm clearly in her Facebook advertising like crosshairs, right? And I always notice her in my feed because she's like, you know.
And that's Molly for me. So Molly is a good pattern interrupt.
Oh, Molly Mahoney is great. Yes. And it's not even her. But yeah, so I start my midweek minute videos by going, hey, it's your midweek minute, you know. So I just kind of do that But now, ever since I've been learning from you and hearing about what you do, I've been trying to be a lot more deliberate with the way that I move my hands. And I really have a lot more to learn from you in that regard. But it's really very interesting and certainly something to think about, not only on live streams, but also even just when talking person to person. It's incredible how we can shift that energy.
Yes, exactly. It's one of those things where when you see movement, right? Like I'm looking at the camera right now, but when a car passes by, it kind of catches my attention because it's biological, it's evolutionary for me.
Yeah.
Like I had to pay attention to see if something
Is that a
is
predator?
around me, right? Yeah. Let's see, is there a predator? Or is that a UPS package? Is that the toilet paper that I've been waiting for? No. Right? But movement catches our attention. And that's one of the reasons why when you watch Lights Camera Live, not only do I wave my hand, but it's me inside that Mac desktop because it's different.
Yes.
It's different from what you normally see out there. And when you stand out, then you become top of mind.
I love that. So it's disruptive in a really good way. It's
In a good
disruptive
way,
in a
right?
comfortable way.
Yeah.
A non-scary way. I love that. So let's talk about some of the things you do with your language in order to keep people paying attention to you and focused and watching your videos and connecting with you.
Okay, so one of the things that I like to do is I always talk about the format formula because I feel like most people, when they want to do video, they're like, well, what do I say? How do I even get started? And so this was done by Dr. Bernice McCarthy back in the 1970s. And she had a classroom of students, and she's like, well, how do people actually learn? And people learn by asking specific questions. So they want to know why this is important for my business, right? What are you going to teach me? Like, what are the terms? What are the definitions? How is this going to impact my business? And Christine, if I listen to you, right? If I listen to you, how is this going to be advantageous to me? Or what are the consequences if I don't do it? And when you cover that information, then people know, like, cool, this is why I should tune in. This is how it's going to impact me. And now I need to dedicate the time to this. Some people, when they communicate, and you know this, you've come across people where they only want to tell you the how of like, oh,
Yes.
I did this with my blog post, and you're like, but why?
Yeah.
Like, why would you even do that? Like, why is that your process? Or some people would just tell you like, oh, you should switch from QuickBooks over to FreshBooks, but you're like, why? And they're like, oh, and this is how you do it. But why?
And people often do the opposite way too. They kind of, make these broad pronouncements about what you've got to do, and then they don't follow up. And you're like, but why should I trust you then if you're not actually helping me here? Yeah.
Exactly. Like, why should I invest my time? Or if they're trying to say like, hey, this is why you should do live video and this is how you get started. And then they're missing the what. It's like, well, but what do I need to get started? And then at that point, you frustrate the heck out of them because they're like,
Yes.
I'll just Google it myself because I'll find it over there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear a little bit more from you about specifically live video. You've been doing live video for a while, right? How long have you been going live?
It's 2016, so 4 years? Yeah, it's 4 years now.
And it's hard to remember just how new live video still is because 2016, it was pretty darn new. What inspired you to get started with live video?
Oh, that's a good story. So I was in the ad agency world for about a good decade and a half. And Christine, when I realized that I was pregnant with my daughter, right, that's when I realized, okay, well, I can't work 50 plus hours a week. So what can I do to build that freedom and that flexibility so I could have that legacy for her, for me, and my family? And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start my own consulting agency. And then little did I realize that everyone else was calling themselves a strategist. I was like, well, crap, well, how do I separate myself from all of that? And so that's when I realized, man, I have to do video. And I have to embrace live video because that's the thing that everyone was talking about, but no one was doing it. And so everyone was like, well, I could do a social media strategy. And I was like, well, let me show you how I do it. And once I started doing live video, that was game over. It was like all of a sudden people would share the videos. I saw your video. Someone referred you to me. Word of mouth just continued to spread. And that was the only thing I really focused on as far as like getting clients.
What were those early videos about? Did you have a regular show? Were they kind of ad hoc at the beginning?
Oh my gosh. Like if you watch like my very, very first one, it was how to develop your social media content calendar.
Mm-hmm.
So like I went behind the scenes and I showed like this Excel spreadsheet that I used to use, how I would put the content together, and then people were really interested. I basically used any of the questions that my family would ask me at family gatherings. They're like, what do you mean you do social media? Like, how do you do social media, right?
Yes.
And those were good questions. And so then I would show them, like, this is what I mean when I say I'm doing social media for this brand. Like, this is how I'm creating content. This is how I'm planning it. This is how I'm scheduling it and maintaining their community. And they're like, oh, I didn't know that. And I was like, interesting.
Yeah.
I wonder what other people don't know about social media and what goes on behind the scenes.
Because when you're swimming in it, you don't know what people don't know. So that's great that you were able to kind of use the everyman to sort of figure out what to communicate. So when did you make a shift from being more of a social media generalist to really kind of owning the live video space with Lights Camera Live and with your programs?
Oh my gosh. That was, I would say, October of 2016. My girlfriend was putting on Social VidCon, her own conference.
Mm-hmm.
And she had seen my video. And she's like, I want you to teach them how to use OBS Studio, which for those of you who don't know OBS Studio, it's like the IKEA of live streaming, So there's like a lot of training for that. And when I did that, that's when people were like, oh my gosh, think of the possibilities. Think of what can happen when you start live streaming. And then after that, it was like then Tyler Anderson reached out to me for Social Media Day San Diego. And that's when I was like, oh my God, I'm being known for live video. And then Stelzner had me on his podcast, and then it blew up from there.
That's awesome. And you don't just do your own show. You help companies live stream their events. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so one of my clients is the National Conflict Resolution Center, and we're all about how to communicate with civility, which is like so important in today's climate. And it really is, yeah. And so one of our events is called the Peacemaker Awards. And when they first brought me on board, I was like, well, let's live stream to audiences that aren't going to be there. So that way they could still learn about what it is that you do. And when we did that, oh my gosh, like our partners, our sponsors started to share it. And now it's a part of like their sponsorship packages. So that was like the first event that I did. The other one, I was working with Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air. And it's funny. This is plumbing. This is like toilets and bidets and water heaters. Yeah. But they knew me, again, from my ad agency days. But that company was celebrating like their 40th anniversary. And it was a female-owned plumbing service. She makes millions of dollars. She gives back to the community. She's known as like the pink plumber. Mm-hmm. Well, she wanted to highlight all the different services that they had to offer, but she wanted like 8 different cameras. Wow. And Christine, you and I are used to having one camera.
Yes, we are.
So in that event, I was like, well, how do I connect 8 different cameras? Because hell, I don't have budget to buy 8 cameras. And that's when I discovered Switcher Studio, and you could connect multiple iOS devices, your phone, your mini iPads, and your regular iPads. And so we set those stations up, created a switchboard, and then boom, we were done.
That's incredible. And people don't necessarily even realize that you can do that. You can have a switchboard almost like, at a TV studio or like the lighting board at an event where you can kind of say, okay, you know what? The streaming software sees one input, which is the board, but then the board has like a bajillion.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was like a really cool experience. And then the other one I did for Master Chef Claudia Sandoval. Have I ever told you that story?
No.
So,
that sounds awesome.
Yeah. So one of my good friends is Chef Claudia Sandoval. But before she won like Master Chef, we both worked at the same agency.
Oh, wow.
So so we were always good friends. We hosted like the world's largest Instagram meetup in San Diego.
Wow.
And years later, she won MasterChef, and she hit me up because she saw Lights Camera Live, and she's like, you know what, T-Mobile wants me to do a live video of me making my famous tres leches cake. And so back then, I just had my iPhone 6. And that was the first time I did like a branded video before NCRC was Chef Claudia Sandoval with one ring light. And then I think we
Wow.
had like 10 poster boards that we used as cue cards. So it was like we went to the dollar store. This was like a $10 production.
I love that.
Yeah, it was like a $10 production with the phone that I had, the one ring light that I was using for my show, and she had about 178,000 downloads of her book in 24 hours. That's when I
Wow.
realized like the magic of live streaming.
So, what is it about live streaming that really gets people more than just putting a produced video out there?
It's okay. If you think about it from a psychological level, right? Our brain gets those happy dose of chemicals. You get that dopamine because it gets your curiosity because it's live video. You never know what's going to happen, right? So you want to watch until the very end. And then you get that oxytocin where it's like, if I ask Christine a question and she answers, I'm like, oh, I love her. She's answering all of my questions and oh my gosh, that person had a question too. Like we're all in this together and you develop like this community.
And
So
we get
you
a
get the
hit too because you get people like George Demanis who just wrote, "Oh my God, it's Stephanie Liu," and his comment is getting put up on the screen. So I hope he gets a dopamine hit. I hope you get a dopamine hit because someone's saying, "Oh my God, it's Stephanie Liu." I'm getting a dopamine hit because someone's watching and commenting. This is good.
yeah.
I'm not
But it is
alone.
good. It's like we're happiness dealers. It's like you get a dose of happiness and you get a dose of happiness, right? Especially now, like when everyone's like in panic and fear mode,
Ah,
you're
yeah.
just like, okay, you could do that, but I'm going to emit some happy vibes to people. And so that's what I love about live video. And that's why I think people are so engaged. And when I see people like George at events, and when I see you at an event, I'm like, oh my God, it's Christine. I gotta give me that hug.
And it kind of feels like you're at an event when you're live because you are putting your energy in the same place as the people who are broadcasting and all the people who are watching, and it's kind of awesome. George says everybody gets dopamine. We are the Oprahs of dopamine right here.
Oh my God, I love that. I might actually have to steal that, the Oprah of dopamine.
You know what? Go right ahead, girl. I love that. So, to your point about the fact that it makes people feel connected and like we're all together in something, I'm curious about your thoughts about now with all the social distancing and all of that. How do you think we're going to see live streaming used differently? What are your
I
thoughts on
still
that?
think, okay, so I think we're going to see more people jumping onto video, period, because now you're going to have conference calls. And I'm hoping that as people get comfortable just talking to their peers, their colleagues in that sense, that it's going to make them realize, okay, what are the possibilities if I actually do a live video? And I think for those like you and me that are early, it's crazy to say that. We're still early adopters,
Yeah, it is
even though
still
live
fairly
streaming,
early, even though we've been doing it for years.
yeah, we've been doing it for years, but you and I understand like how to produce a show. We know like the intros, the outros, the structure of it. And so I think a lot of people who are staying at home are still looking for entertainment. They're still looking for ways that they could learn and engage with other people. And live video, that's your opportunity. Like oh my gosh, Christine, she's doing it. Like you want to follow her, you want to hang out with her, you want to binge watch on her shows because she's teaching you something.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'm looking for it. It's funny because on the one hand, if everyone's doing live video, what will that look like in our feeds?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I mean, it is ultimately, I like what you said about how once people get accustomed to speaking to their peers on conference calls, maybe it'll give them that little jolt of energy. Last night, our friend Chris Strub, who was last week's guest, he decided to do a quiz show. He did a little
I
quiz show
saw.
on live stream, and it was great because it got so many comments and so much engagement. It got over 500 comments live, not replay, live, to the point where Switcher like couldn't handle them. He's like, I
Couldn't
think
catch
I
up.
broke Switcher Studio. It was incredible. Tim Sohn won. I had an early lead, but then I got flattened. And it's just a really interesting use case. I myself tonight on Zoom video, I'm having a Cards Against Humanity party on
I
my personal
saw.
profile. If you have a deck at home, join us, grab a beverage. It's not business related, it's just hanging out. Because
I love that.
we crave connection. And my friend Michelle says, I'm loving this conversation. She just hasn't been commenting because she's making tuna, so her hands haven't been free. I love this. Michelle is actually someone who's getting really comfortable with video, and she's not doing them live, but it feels so intimate because they're scrappy and they're just there straight from her phone. It feels like you're really talking to somebody. It's really nice. Oh, she did her second live stream this morning. Go, Michelle! Yay!
Yeah.
Yay! So in terms of live streaming in general, and sorry, I didn't. This is kind of questions that are just popping into my head, but
I love it.
So we talked about some best practices for live streaming and for kind of focusing attention and all of that, and making your audience feel safe and comfortable. We talked about sort of how it might be going in this coronavirus place. What are some of the things that you see happening with live streaming in general? Like, even if coronavirus hadn't happened, where do you see things going? Because there's been so much change just in the few years that live streaming has existed.
Okay. Well, if we want to talk about the trajectory of live streamers, I will say that some people that start their own shows, like let's say like Michelle right now, who's just like, I just did my second live stream. Someone, Michelle, is watching in the background and they are in awe of you. And when it's time for them to do their own show, they're going to hit you up. And now you're going to embrace a new title called Remote Live Producer. Ooh. And that's when you're actually producing shows for other people where you don't even have to be on camera. Like I've done this for conferences where they're like, we want to feature our guest speakers, but no one on staff knows how to do live video. And I was like, well, cool. You're in St. Louis? I could do that here in San Diego. They're like, what? How do you do that? So now that's like another, you talk about like coronavirus and you can't do something, but leverage the skills that you already have. So now you could become a remote live producer. Right?
And how do you do that? Like I should find that I might have to push Greg Gritman into service here.
Yeah. So here's the thing. So you're using Ecamm right now. Yay, Ecamm.
Yay, Ecamm. I love Ecamm.
Yay, Ecamm. So here's what you would do. If you wanted to have a host and their guest, all three of you would be on Skype. Okay. And then you would bring in the host and the guest into Ecamm, right? But you're in the background. When
so
you
the
are
input
speaking,
that's on, so the camera that's on me, I just don't put on as an input.
Yep, you don't put it on as an input. And as a result, you mute your mic in Ecamm, so the audience, like Michelle and George, they won't hear you, but as you're speaking, they're going to hear you in Skype. Does that make sense?
It does. Oh, I love that. And I wonder how, I know Ecamm is going to be getting native guest functionality instead of using Skype, so I wonder how it'll change with that, but you can probably still use Skype as an input regardless. So that's kind of cool. Oh, I like that a lot.
So because Christine already knows how to do a show, she's like, no, this is how you promote a show. This is how you get people engaged. This is how you repurpose your content, right? She knows about lighting. She knows about audio. She can now package that up and sell that in addition to like social media retainers and like paid advertising. This is like things that have happened in my life that I'm like, you could do this too. You can, because people are probably going to like your style. So that's one thing that's going to happen. Another one,
make me some money, girl.
Girl, I make everybody money. So listen, honey, we're talking about money now. So
and dopamine, money and dopamine. You're the best.
Money and dopamine. Yeah, you get money, you get dopamine. Mary Fink Brandt.
Oh yeah, talked to her this morning.
Exactly. So she knows all about LinkedIn. She was one of the first people that got access to LinkedIn Live. Well, if you're a company and you want to reach out to a very affluent audience and you want to stand out in that newsfeed, wouldn't it make sense for you to do a LinkedIn Live?
Yeah.
But what if you don't have access? Well, now Mary Fink Brandt is a LinkedIn Live producer. So now she specializes specifically on LinkedIn. She knows how to set up like a registration page, how to promote it, how to get like multiple speakers on there. So now you can have a virtual summit on LinkedIn. This is like, that's in her mind, she's like, I'm going to do workshops. I'm going to do events. I was like, girl, you can take that and you could do that online. And so what are we seeing now? We're seeing a lot of these conferences and these events now trying to shift online. And the live streamers in our circle are gaining from that. They're leveraging that experience and they're using it to their advantage.
I love it. We are coughing all the way to the bank. No, sorry, that was terrible. sorry. Did I just make you cough?
Yes.
Oh, God. All right. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Stephanie Liu. Tell everyone just a little bit about how they can find you and what you do and where you are.
Good. I'm like, is it still there? Is
Oh,
it going to go
no.
away? My unconscious mind heard you.
Oh.
So you can find me at lightscameralive.com. That's where you'll find everything on my website about previous episodes. But if you really want to geek out with me, Christine knows this.
Yes.
The best place is the social media strategist group, because we are just open and honest about like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? Like, has anyone tested this? We're all strategists and we all learn from each other. It's a safe environment. Plus, I geek out. Like, I might ask you, like, which enamel pin do you like? Which designs do you like? All that good stuff. In fact, this was like the OG pin
Ooh.
back in
Oh.
the day.
Very nice.
So if you're already in the group, you already know that like a new pin is coming out. And I'm like, limited edition. Super excited about it.
I love that. So Stephanie Liu of Lights Camera Live, thank you so much for being on. This is, as I said before, I'm Christine Gritman. This is Social. I do the show every week where normally I interview smart friends like Stephanie about social media. Next week is my 100th episode. I've been doing this show on and off since April of 2017, and we calculated it. Next week is 100. So next week, I'm still going to be on live, but I'm going to be hosting sort of a clip show of some of my favorite insights from those 100, or really probably more of that, like 92 or so smart friends, because I have repeat guests sometimes. I have especially smart friends from like, you gotta come back. So tune in next week for that. I'll still be live and I'll still be communicating with everybody, but it's going to be kind of all killer, no filler, a really good clip show. And the week after that, I'll have return guest Brian Fanzo and first time guest Jen Watson sharing the screen. So that's going to be really fun. So thanks everyone, and thanks to Stephanie. Bye.